The coffee cup slipped from her trembling hands in slow motion. $2,000 worth of Italian suit, the most powerful CEO in Manhattan, and Naomi Sinclair's career, over before it began. But when she looked up, terrified, expecting ice, he smiled. For the first time in 3 years, Dominic Sterling smiled. That single moment would unravel everything: his carefully built walls, her impossible dreams, and the dark secret one woman would kill to protect. Sometimes the biggest accidents lead to the most dangerous love stories. The morning sun cast golden ribbons across Manhattan's skyline as Naomi Sinclair stood before the towering glass monument that housed Sterling Global. 73 floors of steel, ambition, and dreams. Her reflection stared back at her from the pristine entrance, a young black woman in a carefully chosen navy blazer, natural curls styled into an elegant updo, carrying a portfolio that represented 4 years of sleepless nights at Columbia University. 26 years old, and this was her moment. Sterling Global wasn't just a marketing firm, it was the summit of an impossible mountain, where campaigns were born that shifted cultural conversations, where brands became movements, where careers were made or destroyed before lunch. Getting an internship here was like catching lightning in a bottle. 5,000 applications, 12 positions, and somehow, miraculously, Naomi Sinclair had been chosen. She took a breath that tasted like possibility and pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby was a cathedral of modern luxury, white marble floors that reflected the light from crystal chandeliers, minimalist furniture in shades of cream and silver, walls adorned with awards and campaigns that had changed the world. Women in designer heels clicked past with purpose. Men in tailored suits spoke in confident tones about millions and markets and momentum. Naomi approached the reception desk, where a woman with razor-sharp cheekbones and an even sharper gaze barely glanced up. "Naomi Sinclair, I'm starting today as a 33rd floor, human resources. Elizabeth will handle your orientation." The receptionist's fingers never stopped moving across her keyboard, dismissing Naomi with the efficiency of someone who'd seen 1,000 nervous interns come and go. The elevator bank was to the left, 6 gleaming doors of polished chrome. Naomi joined a small crowd waiting, adjusting the leather portfolio bag on her shoulder, trying to calm the hummingbird flutter of her heartbeat. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. She stepped inside with 5 others, all absorbed in their phones, their coffee, their private worlds of importance. The doors began to close. "Hold it!" A hand shot through the gap. The doors retracted obediently, and Dominic Sterling stepped into the elevator. Naomi knew him instantly, though knowing and seeing were entirely different experiences. She'd studied his face in business journals, watched interviews where his sharp intellect dismantled questions with surgical precision, read articles that called him brilliant, ruthless, untouchable, but photographs were flat, lifeless things compared to the reality of him. He was tall, over 6 feet of lean, controlled power, wrapped in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all angles and shadows, with steel-grey eyes that seemed to see through surfaces to the truth beneath. There was something almost cruel in his beauty, something that warned people to keep their distance. And there was something else, a coldness that went beyond professional reserve, an emptiness that luxury and success couldn't quite hide. Everyone in the elevator shifted, creating space for him without being asked. He moved to the back corner, pressed the button for the 73rd floor, the executive suite, the realm of gods, and settled into absolute stillness, staring at the polished doors as if he were entirely alone. Naomi found herself directly in front of him, clutching her coffee from the cafe down the street, a vanilla latte that had seemed like a good idea, but now felt like a liability. Her hands were trembling slightly. First-day nerves. First elevator ride. First moment in the same confined space as the legendary Dominic Sterling. The elevator began its smooth ascent. 10th floor, 15th floor, 21st floor. Someone exited, then another. The space grew quieter, emptier, until only Naomi and two others remained, and Dominic Sterling, silent as a statue in the corner, radiating an energy that made the air feel thin. 30th floor. Naomi shifted her weight, adjusting her grip on the coffee cup. The elevator swayed just a fraction, the normal motion of a mechanical system, but it was enough. Her fingers, slick with nervous perspiration, lost purchase on the paper cup. Time crystallized into terrible slow motion. The coffee cup tilted, falling forward in a graceful arc. The lid popped free. Dark liquid flew through the air in a perfect, devastating wave, and splashed directly across Dominic Sterling's chest. The elevator went silent. Someone gasped. The coffee spread across $2,000 worth of Italian wool, a dark, damning stain that seemed to grow with each passing second. "Oh my God!" Naomi's voice came out as a horrified whisper. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, She spun around, and her soul left her body. Dominic Sterling stood perfectly still, looking down at his ruined suit with an expression Naomi couldn't read. Coffee dripped from his jacket onto the elevator floor. His jaw was set, his eyes hidden beneath dark lashes. The two other passengers had pressed themselves against the walls, trying to disappear, their faces masks of second-hand mortification. "I'm so sorry, sir, I didn't—" The elevator moved and Naomi fumbled in her bag for tissues, napkins, anything, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grasp anything. "Please, I'll pay for the cleaning, She looked up at him, tissue clutched uselessly in her hand, and their eyes met for the first time. His were grey, storm cloud grey, ocean before lightning grey, and they were looking at her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. The moment stretched, and then something impossible happened. The corner of Dominic Sterling's mouth twitched. It started as the smallest movement, barely perceptible, like the first crack in a frozen lake. Then it spread, slowly, inevitably, transforming the harsh lines of his face into something entirely different. He smiled. Not a polite, professional smile. Not a cold, dismissive smile. A real smile, genuine and unexpected and utterly transforming. It reached his eyes, softening the steel into something warm, almost boyish. Laugh lines appeared at the corners of his eyes, suggesting a man who used to smile often before something had stolen that ease away. "It's just a suit," he said. His voice was deep, textured, nothing like the clipped tones from business interviews. There was amusement in it, actual amusement. The elevator reached the 33rd floor and opened with a cheerful chime that felt absurd given the situation. "I really am sorry," Naomi managed, still frozen in place, unable to reconcile the man before her with every story she'd heard about the ice-cold CEO who never smiled, never softened, never showed anything resembling human warmth. "First day?" he asked. She nodded mutely. "Then, welcome to Sterling Global, Miss Sinclair, Naomi Sinclair." He held her gaze for another moment, that impossible smile still playing at his lips, and something passed between them. Recognition, curiosity, a spark of something neither of them could name. "Welcome, Miss Sinclair. Try to avoid any more disasters today." The doors began to close. Naomi stepped out at the last second, still clutching her useless tissues, and turned back just in time to see him, still smiling, still watching her, as the elevator carried him up to the 73rd floor. The doors sealed shut, and Naomi stood alone in the hallway, her heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with ruining a CEO's suit. 3 floors above, in the executive suite, Marcus Chen looked up from his desk as Dominic Sterling walked into his office, coffee-stained, rumpled, and wearing something Marcus hadn't seen in 3 years. A smile. "What happened to you?" Marcus asked, setting down his pen. Dominic moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Manhattan, the stain on his jacket catching the morning light. He didn't answer immediately, just stood there, one hand in his pocket, looking out at the city that had watched him build an empire while his heart slowly froze over. "Dom, someone spilled coffee on me in the elevator." Marcus waited. There was more to this story. Had to be, to explain the expression on his best friend's face. "And?" Marcus prompted. Dominic turned from the window and his expression was complicated, confused, amused, alive in a way Marcus hadn't seen since before the accident, since before Elena. "And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel angry," Dominic said quietly. I don't know what I felt." He shook his head, as if trying to clear it, then moved toward his private office. "I need to change. We have the Meridian meeting at 10. But Dominic was already closing the door, leaving Marcus alone with questions and the strange sense that something had just shifted. Something small and seemingly insignificant. A cup of spilled coffee, an accidental collision between 2 strangers in an elevator. Sometimes the smallest accidents create the biggest consequences. Marcus turned back to his work, but he couldn't shake the feeling that his best friend, the man who'd been emotionally dead for 3 years, had just taken his first breath in a very long time. In human resources, Naomi sat through orientation in a daze. Elizabeth droned on about company policies, benefits packages, professional conduct expectations. Forms were signed, ID badges were created. But Naomi's mind was 73 floors away, replaying those 30 seconds in the elevator over and over, the way he'd looked at her, the way he'd smiled, genuinely smiled, as if she'd given him an unexpected gift instead of ruining his morning. The warmth in his voice when he'd said, "Welcome to Sterling Global." "Miss Sinclair!" Naomi snapped back to attention. Elizabeth was watching her with the patient expression of someone who'd just repeated a question twice. "Sorry." "Yes?" "I said your supervisor will be meeting you shortly. You've been assigned to the Strategic Accounts Division on the 47th floor. It's unusual for an intern to start there. Usually you'd begin in research or support. But someone specifically requested you." "Requested me?" Naomi's heart skipped. "Who?" Elizabeth consulted her tablet, her perfectly manicured nails scrolling through information. "It doesn't say. The request came from executive level, that's all I know." "Consider yourself lucky. Strategic Accounts works directly with our highest profile clients. If you perform well there, your career at Sterling Global could advance very quickly." Lucky. Naomi thought about coffee spreading across expensive wool, about storm-grey eyes and an impossible smile, about the way the universe sometimes throws people together in the strangest, most unexpected ways. Maybe luck was exactly what this was, or maybe it was something far more dangerous. By afternoon, Naomi had been assigned a desk in an open workspace where other junior employees typed furiously, answered phones with professional efficiency, and moved with the choreographed precision of people who understood that every moment mattered. Her immediate supervisor was a woman named Claire, 40-something, sharply intelligent, with kind eyes that assessed Naomi quickly and seemed to approve of what they found. "You're the Columbia graduate," Claire said, not as a question. "I read your thesis on emotional branding in the digital age. Impressive work." "Thank you," Naomi replied, genuinely surprised that anyone had read it. "We don't waste talent here, Miss Sinclair. You'll be working on real campaigns, real deadlines, real consequences. Can you handle that?" "Yes." "Good." Claire handed her a tablet loaded with files. Start by reviewing these 3 accounts. I want your analysis by end of day tomorrow. What's working, what isn't, what you'd change. Don't hold back. We value bold thinking here. The afternoon disappeared into research, note-taking, strategic analysis. Naomi lost herself in the work, the thing she was actually good at, the reason she'd fought so hard to be here. Around her, the office hummed with focused energy. This was what she'd dreamed about. This was where she belonged. At 6:30, as the sun began its descent over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Naomi stretched at her desk and allowed herself a moment of victory. She'd survived her first day. She'd ruined the CEO's suit and somehow lived to tell the tale. She'd been given meaningful work, not intern busy work. She was here. She was actually here. Naomi Sinclair, she looked up to find a young man in an expensive suit, assistant written all over him, standing by her desk with a curious expression. Yes? Mr. Sterling would like to see you. 73rd floor. The office went completely silent. Every head turned, every eye landed on Naomi with expressions ranging from shock to envy to something that looked like pity. Claire appeared at her shoulder, her voice low. Did something happen today? I spilled coffee on him. In the elevator, this morning. Several people inhaled sharply. Someone muttered a prayer. Claire's expression remained neutral, but there was concern in her eyes. Go, she said quietly. And whatever happens up there, hold your head high. Naomi gathered her bag with trembling hands and followed the assistant to the elevator. The ride to the 73rd floor felt eternal. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished doors, professional, composed, terrified. What did Dominic Sterling want with her? Was this where he fired her personally? Was there some protocol for interns who destroyed executive clothing? Would this humiliation be private or public? The doors opened onto a different world. The executive suite was hushed elegance incarnate, cream carpets thick enough to sink into, original art on walls painted in sophisticated neutrals, floor-to-ceiling windows offering 360-degree views of Manhattan at twilight. This wasn't an office. This was a kingdom. The assistant led her past empty desks, everyone had gone home, to a set of double doors at the far end. He knocked once, then opened them without waiting for a response. Miss Sinclair, sir. Naomi stepped through, and the doors closed softly behind her. Dominic Sterling's office was less a workspace and more a statement of power. Massive windows, minimalist furniture in black and chrome, a desk that looked like a work of art. And behind it, still in his coffee-stained shirt, jacket removed, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that suggested he did more than just sign papers, sat the man who'd smiled at her this morning. He looked up as she entered, and something flickered in those grey eyes. Recognition, interest, something else she couldn't name. Miss Sinclair, thank you for coming. His voice was different here, quieter, more intimate, without the formality of the elevator encounter. Of course, Mr. Sterling. Naomi stayed near the door, unsure, uncertain. If this is about this morning, I want to apologize again. I'm happy to. This isn't about the coffee. He stood, moving around his desk with fluid grace, and leaned against the front edge. Casual, but the casualness felt deliberate, controlled. This is about your work. My work, but I just started today. I know. I also know you graduated top of your class from Columbia. I know you turned down positions at 3 other firms to accept our internship. I know your thesis challenged conventional wisdom about consumer behavior, and was right. He crossed his arms, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm. What I don't know is why someone with your credentials and opportunities would start at the bottom here. Naomi met his gaze, finding her courage. Because starting at the top somewhere else isn't the same as earning my way up at Sterling Global. This firm doesn't just create campaigns, it creates cultural moments. I wanted to learn from the best. Something shifted in his expression. Approval, perhaps, or recognition of an ambition that matched his own. I have a project, he said after a moment. High-stakes client, impossible timeline, careers on the line. I need someone brilliant, hungry, and not afraid to challenge assumptions. He paused. Marcus suggested I pull someone from strategic accounts. But after this morning, after meeting you, I had a different thought. Naomi's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. I'd like you on my team, directly. For the next 6 weeks, you'd work on executive-level strategy. It means longer hours, higher pressure, and scrutiny from people who'll assume you're not ready. But if you succeed... He let the sentence hang, heavy with possibility. This was insane. This was unprecedented. Interns didn't work on executive teams. They especially didn't work directly with the CEO. This was the kind of opportunity that could launch a career or destroy one before it began. Why me? Naomi asked, needing to understand. You don't know me. You don't know if I can handle it. Dominic Sterling looked at her with those storm cloud eyes, and the ghost of that morning smile returned, subtle, private, dangerous. Because this morning, when you could have panicked or made excuses or blamed the elevator, you apologized with dignity and offered to fix what you'd broken. Because you didn't recognize me, or if you did, you treated me like a person, not a position. And because... He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. Because something tells me you're exactly what this project needs. The air between them felt charged, electric with unspoken implications. So, he continued, his voice dropping to something almost intimate, are you brave enough to say yes, Miss Sinclair? Naomi thought about every reason to say no. About playing it safe. About following the traditional intern path. About not risking everything on a crazy gamble with a man whose eyes held secrets and whose smile could probably destroy her if she let it. Then she thought about why she'd come here in the first place. Not for safety, for greatness. Yes, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I'm brave enough. Dominic Sterling smiled again, that real, transforming smile that made him look like someone who'd forgotten how to be happy until a stranger spilled coffee on him. Good. We start tomorrow. 7 in the morning. Don't be late. I won't. She turned to leave, got 3 steps toward the door before his voice stopped her. Miss Sinclair. She looked back. He was watching her with an expression that was too complicated to read. Curiosity, concern, something that looked almost like warning. Be careful up here. The higher you climb, the harder the fall. It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it sounded like he was speaking from experience, like he was someone who'd climbed too high and fallen too hard and was still trying to figure out how to stand again. I'll be careful, Naomi promised. But as she left his office and rode the elevator back down to ground level, as she stepped out into the Manhattan evening where a million lights competed with emerging stars, she knew she was lying. There was nothing careful about what she'd just agreed to, nothing careful about the way her pulse jumped when Dominic Sterling looked at her. Nothing careful about the feeling that her entire life had just changed course, and there was no going back to who she'd been this morning. Before the coffee, before the smile, before a stranger became something far more dangerous than a boss. Tomorrow, everything would begin. Tonight, Naomi walked home through the city that raised her, feeling like the world had just tilted on its axis. Somewhere 73 floors above, Dominic Sterling stood at his window, staring at his reflection in the darkening glass, and wondered what the hell he'd just done. Naomi arrived at Sterling Global at 6:45 the next morning, carrying coffee for 2. a peace offering and a private joke she hoped Dominic Sterling would appreciate. The executive suite was empty at this hour, bathed in the blue-grey light of pre-dawn Manhattan, silent except for the whisper of the climate control and the distant hum of the waking city below. She found his office door open, light spilling into the corridor like an invitation. He was already there, of course. Men like Dominic Sterling didn't sleep, or if they did it efficiently, treating rest like another task to be optimized. He stood at the windows with his back to the door, one hand in the pocket of his perfectly tailored navy suit, the other holding a phone to his ear. His voice was low, controlled, speaking in what sounded like flawless Italian. Naomi hesitated in the doorway, unsure whether to interrupt, but something in his tone, a thread of warmth she hadn't heard yesterday, made her listen. "Ti amo anch'io, piccola," he said softly. "Yes, Uncle Marcus will read you another chapter tonight. I promise." Uncle Marcus, a child. Dominic Sterling had someone he loved, someone who made his voice gentle like that. He ended the call and turned, catching Naomi frozen in the doorway with 2 coffee cups and the dawning realization that she'd just witnessed something private. "Miss Sinclair, you're early." His professional mask slid back into place so smoothly, she almost questioned what she'd heard. Almost. "I brought coffee," she said, holding up the cups with a tentative smile. "As an apology for yesterday, and as insurance that I won't spill anything today." Something flickered in his grey eyes, amusement maybe, or appreciation for someone who could acknowledge their mistakes with humour. He crossed to his desk, gestured for her to enter. "That's thoughtful, thank you." She handed him 1 cup, careful to ensure their fingers didn't touch, though the proximity alone sent an electric awareness through her system. He was taller than she'd realized, at least 6 feet 3 inches, and he smelled like expensive cologne and something else, something clean and masculine that made her deeply conscious of the small space between them. "Black, no sugar," she said. "I asked your assistant yesterday what you preferred." "Thorough," he observed, taking a sip. "That's good. This project requires attention to detail." He moved behind his desk, pressing something on his tablet. The wall opposite his windows illuminated, becoming a massive screen displaying logos, data, projections, a presentation that looked like it represented millions of dollars in potential revenue. "Valentino Ricci," Dominic said, his tone shifting into business mode. "Italian luxury automotive manufacturer. They're launching their first fully electric vehicle in 6 months, a $200,000 hypercar that's supposed to revolutionize the industry. They've hired Sterling Global to create the North American campaign." Naomi moved closer to the screen, her marketing mind already analyzing the challenge. Electric luxury vehicles, Italian heritage, American market. The complications were immediately obvious. "The problem," Dominic continued, "is that every competitor is using the same playbook. Sustainability, innovation, future. The messaging has become white noise. Ricci's CEO wants something different, something that captures imagination and desire, not just environmental responsibility. So we need to make people fall in love," Naomi murmured, studying the sleek lines of the vehicle on screen. "Not just with the car, but with what owning it says about them." She felt rather than saw Dominic's attention sharpen on her. "Explain." Naomi turned to face him, finding him leaning against his desk with his arms crossed, watching her with an intensity that should have been intimidating, but instead felt like challenge, like he was testing her, wanting her to be as good as he hoped. "Electric vehicles are practical, logical, but nobody spends $200,000 on logic. They spend it on emotion, on the story they tell themselves about who they are." She gestured to the car on screen. "This isn't just a vehicle. It's a declaration. It says, I'm powerful enough to afford the best, conscious enough to care about the future, confident enough to choose beauty and performance without compromise. It's not about the environment, it's about identity. Silence stretched between them. Naomi's heart pounded, wondering if she'd overstepped, been too bold, too soon. Then Dominic Sterling smiled, not the surprise smile from the elevator, but something more dangerous. Something that suggested respect and interest, and a recognition of an equal mind. That, he said quietly, is exactly what I needed to hear. He straightened, moving to stand beside her, close enough that she caught his scent again, close enough that the air felt thin. He pulled up another screen. Competitor analysis, market research, consumer psychology studies. We have 6 weeks to develop and present the full campaign. Ricci's team arrives from Milan for the final pitch on December 15th. If we win this account, Sterling Global secures a $15 million contract and establishes dominance in the luxury automotive space. If we lose... He paused, and something shadowed his expression. Let's just say failure isn't an option. Naomi absorbed the weight of those words. This wasn't just about a campaign. This was about legacy, reputation, empire. What do you need from me? She asked. Everything, Dominic replied, holding her gaze. Your insights, your creativity, your willingness to challenge me when I'm wrong. For the next 6 weeks, you're not an intern, you're a strategist. Can you handle that? It was a question with layers. Could she handle the work? Could she handle the pressure? Could she handle him? This complicated, guarded man who smiled like sunrise and spoke with the precision of someone who'd learned to armor his words? Yes, Naomi said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. Then we begin. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm Naomi had never experienced, exhilarating, exhausting, addictive. She and Dominic worked 15-hour days, sometimes alone in his office, as the sun traced its arc across Manhattan, sometimes joined by Marcus Chen, who brought strategic financial insight and a dry humor that occasionally broke through Dominic's intensity. They debated messaging strategies over catered dinners from restaurants Naomi couldn't afford. They argued about consumer psychology while the city blazed with evening lights 73 floors below. They built campaigns and tore them apart and rebuilt them better, stronger, more compelling. And slowly, inevitably, Naomi began to see past the CEO facade to the man beneath. Dominic Sterling was brilliant, but not in the cold, calculating way she'd expected. His mind worked like poetry and mathematics combined, finding patterns and meanings others missed. He remembered everything, every conversation, every insight, every small detail that might matter later. He was demanding, pushing her harder than any professor ever had, refusing to accept good enough when excellent was possible. But he pushed himself harder still, working through lunch, staying until midnight, carrying the weight of every decision like personal responsibility. And there were moments, small, unguarded moments, when the armor cracked and she glimpsed the person he'd been before whatever tragedy had frozen his heart. The way he laughed, really laughed, when she made a self-deprecating joke about her undergraduate fashion choices. The way his voice softened when that same child called during meetings, and he'd step into the hallway to speak with patient tenderness. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention, with an expression that was complicated and conflicted and desperately, dangerously interested. 3 weeks into the project, they worked past midnight developing the campaign's emotional through line. The office was silent, the city a blanket of lights below, and exhaustion had stripped away professional distance. "Tell me something," Dominic said suddenly, setting down his tablet. They were sitting on the floor by the windows, an informal strategy session that had abandoned furniture hours ago. "Why marketing? What made you choose this?" Naomi looked up from her notes, surprised by the personal question. In 3 weeks they discussed strategy, philosophy, consumer behavior, but never themselves. "My grandmother," she said after a moment. "She worked 3 jobs to put my mother through college, cleaning offices at night, cooking in a diner during the day. She never had money, but she had this one thing she loved. This perfume, Chanel No. 5. Cost her 2 weeks' wages, but she saved for it every year." Naomi smiled at the memory. She said it made her feel like someone worth noticing, like she mattered. She met Dominic's gaze, finding him watching her with complete attention. "That's what good marketing does," Naomi continued. "It doesn't just sell products, it sells dignity, identity, the feeling that you matter. I wanted to do that, create campaigns that make people feel seen." Dominic was quiet for a long moment, something shifting in his expression, softness, recognition, pain. "She sounds remarkable," he said quietly. "She was. She died 2 years ago. I'm sorry." The way he said it, simple, genuine, weighted with his own loss, made Naomi understand that Dominic Sterling knew grief intimately. "Who was she?" Naomi asked gently. "The person you lost." His jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he'd retreat behind his walls, shut down the conversation with cold professionalism, but exhaustion and darkness and 3 weeks of growing trust had lowered his defenses. "Elena," he said, the name barely more than a whisper. "My wife. She died 3 years ago. Car accident on the Pacific Coast Highway. She was 29 years old." The weight of those words settled between them, heavy, sacred, devastating. "The little girl who calls you," Naomi said softly, understanding clicking into place. "That's Sophia, Elena's daughter from her first marriage. She was 4 when Elena died. I'm not her biological father, but I'm the only father she remembers." His voice cracked slightly, just enough to reveal the depth of love and loss he carried. "I promised Elena I'd take care of her, so I did. I am." Naomi's heart broke and mended simultaneously. This man, powerful, guarded, seemingly untouchable, was raising a child alone, carrying grief alone, building empires while his heart slowly froze over, protecting himself from ever feeling that kind of pain again. "She's lucky to have you," Naomi said. Dominic met her eyes, and something passed between them. Recognition, connection, the dangerous acknowledgement that they'd just crossed a line from professional to personal, and there was no uncrossing it. "I should get you home," he said roughly, standing abruptly. "It's late." But as he offered his hand to help her up, as their fingers touched and held for a heartbeat longer than necessary, they both knew the truth. It was already too late. Victoria Ashford watched from her office on the 68th floor as Naomi Sinclair left the building at 1 in the morning, looking exhausted and radiant and entirely too comfortable in Dominic Sterling's world. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since that intern had spilled coffee and somehow enchanted the man Victoria had spent 5 years planning to reclaim. She'd been patient. She'd played the long game, rebuilding her position at Sterling Global after the broken engagement, proving her value, waiting for the right moment to remind Dominic what they'd once had, what they could have again. Once enough time had passed, and his grief had faded, and he remembered that Victoria understood his world in ways no one else could. But patience had limits, and watching Dominic smile at that girl, watching him come alive in ways he hadn't even for Victoria during their engagement, those limits had been reached. Victoria lifted her phone, scrolling through contacts until she found the right name, a journalist, ambitious, eager, vicious. Someone who'd appreciate information about impropriety at Sterling Global, about a CEO showing inappropriate favor to a young intern, about conflicts of interest that could damage reputations and create headlines. Not yet, but soon, if necessary. Her finger hovered over the call button, then pulled back. Information was power, but timing was everything. Victoria Ashford hadn't built her career by being impulsive. She'd built it by being strategic, patient, and absolutely ruthless when required. Dominic Sterling would be hers again, and anyone who stood in her way would learn exactly how far Victoria was willing to go. The campaign was coming together like a symphony, disparate notes finding harmony, chaos organizing into something beautiful and powerful. 4 weeks in, and Naomi could see the vision crystallizing, not just an advertisement but a movement. A story about power redefined, about choosing the future without sacrificing passion. Dominic had been right to trust her instincts. Together, they'd created something neither could have built alone. But the professional triumph was eclipsed by something far more dangerous. The attraction between them had grown from spark to wildfire, fed by proximity and late nights, and the intimacy that comes from minds working in perfect synchronization. Every accidental touch felt deliberate. Every shared glance held weight. The air between them crackled with unspoken desire, with the terrible awareness that they were standing at the edge of something that could destroy them both. Naomi knew it was wrong. He was her boss, not technically, but functionally. He was 12 years older. He was grieving a wife, raising a daughter, carrying responsibilities that could be shattered by scandal. Getting involved with him would be career suicide, personal catastrophe, and a betrayal of everything professional she'd worked to build. She knew all of this, and still her heart raced every time he said her name. Still, she found excuses to stay late. Still, she caught herself wondering what his lips would taste like, what his hands would feel like against her skin, what it would be like to be the person who made Dominic Sterling smile the way he'd smiled in that elevator 5 weeks ago. It was a Friday evening, the 5th week of the project, when everything changed. They were alone in his office, as they usually were now. Marcus had left hours ago with a knowing look and a warning Dominic had pretended not to hear. The city glittered below them, a million lights competing with stars, and they'd abandoned the formal workspace for the sitting area by the windows. 2 leather chairs positioned to face the view, a coffee table between them covered in mock-ups and strategy documents. Naomi was presenting the final emotional arc for the campaign, the narrative thread that would tie print, digital, and video content into a cohesive story. She stood by the windows, gesturing as she spoke, feeling the passion of the work flow through her. "The campaign isn't about the car," she said, her natural curls loose tonight, falling past her shoulders after she'd abandoned her professional updo hours ago. "It's about the driver." We open with silence, just the sound of breathing, of a heartbeat. Then we see her. "Her?" Dominic asked from his chair, his jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, watching Naomi with an intensity that had nothing to do with marketing. "Our protagonist. A woman, 40-something, successful, standing at a crossroads. She's built everything the world told her to want. But something's missing. Then she sees it. The Valentino Ricci, midnight blue, waiting like a promise. Naomi's voice dropped, became intimate, and she realizes what's missing isn't success. It's the courage to choose desire over duty, to claim what makes her feel alive. She turned to face Dominic fully, and the look in his eyes stole her breath. He wasn't seeing the campaign anymore. He was seeing her. "That's not about cars," he said quietly. "That's about you." The air went still. "What do you mean?" Dominic stood, moving toward her with the controlled grace of a man who'd decided something and was done fighting it. He stopped close, too close, near enough that she could see gold flecks in his grey eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. You chose duty over desire, he said, Columbia over the full scholarship to Berkeley because your mother was sick and you needed to stay close. The internship here over a paid position at Chen & Associates because you wanted to prove yourself rather than accept help. You sacrifice what you want for what you think you should want. Naomi's heart pounded. How do you know about Berkeley? About Chen & Associates? Because I pay attention. Because I've watched you work yourself to exhaustion for 5 weeks, seen you downplay your own brilliance, caught you eating vending machine dinners because you can't afford the catered meals and you're too proud to accept them. His voice was rough, intense. Because I see you, Naomi. All of you. Not just the brilliant strategist. The woman beneath. No one had ever looked at her the way Dominic Sterling was looking at her now, like she was something precious and terrifying, like seeing her clearly was both gift and curse. Dominic, she whispered, and using his first name felt like crossing a threshold. Tell me I'm wrong. He stepped closer, his hand lifting as if to touch her face, then stopping, trembling in the air between them. Tell me you don't feel this. Tell me these 5 weeks haven't been the best and worst of your life. Tell me you don't think about me the way I think about you, constantly, dangerously, against every rule and reason. Naomi couldn't speak, couldn't lie, couldn't do anything but stare at this man who'd somehow seen past every defense to the truth she'd hidden even from herself. I can't, she finally managed. I can't tell you that. Something broke in his expression, relief and anguish combined. We can't do this, he said, but his hand finally touched her face, fingers tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You work for me. It's unethical. It could destroy your career, damage mine. I know, Naomi breathed. If anyone found out, I know. I'm too broken for this. For you, Elena. His voice cracked. I loved her so much, and I couldn't save her. I couldn't protect the one person who mattered most. What if I fail you too? What if... Naomi placed her hand over his, pressing his palm more firmly against her face. You're not broken, she said fiercely. You're grieving. There's a difference. And whatever this is between us, we don't have to name it. We don't have to do anything about it. But don't tell me you're too damaged to feel it. Don't diminish what's happening by calling it a mistake before we even know what it is. Dominic stared at her like she'd just spoken a truth he'd been running from for 3 years. His thumb traced across her lower lip, just once, barely a touch, but it sent electricity through every nerve ending. You're 26 years old, he whispered. Your whole life ahead of you. Why would you risk it for someone like me? Because you smile when I enter a room, because you listen like my words matter, because you see potential in me that I'm still learning to see in myself. She paused, gathering courage. Because when you look at me, I don't feel like an intern or a project or someone trying to prove herself. I feel like Naomi, just Naomi, and I haven't felt that way in years. The distance between them evaporated. She didn't know who moved first, didn't know if she pulled him closer or if he finally stopped resisting gravity. But suddenly his mouth was on hers, and the world caught fire. The kiss was everything 5 weeks of tension had promised, desperate and tender, controlled and wild, tasting of coffee and desire and 3 years of frozen emotion thawing all at once. His hands tangled in her hair, her fingers gripped his shirt. They kissed like people who'd been starving and had finally found sustenance, like the first breath after drowning, like the end of winter and the beginning of spring happening simultaneously. When they finally broke apart, breathing hard, Dominic pressed his forehead to hers. This is insane, he murmured. Completely. We should stop. We should. Neither of them moved. Then Dominic's phone shattered the moment. A specific ringtone, bright and cheerful. Sophia. He pulled back immediately, the spell breaking, reality crashing in. He answered with visible effort to steady his voice. Hey, Piccola, it's late. You should be asleep." He listened, and his expression softened into pure love. "Yes. Uncle Marcus read you the chapter." "What?" "No, you cannot have a puppy just because the princess in the story has one." He smiled, that real, transforming smile. "We'll talk about it tomorrow. I love you. Sweet dreams." He ended the call and stood there, holding his phone, looking torn between two worlds, the one where he was a father with responsibilities, and the one where he was just a man who'd kissed a woman and felt alive for the first time in 3 years. "I should go," Naomi said quietly, even though leaving was the last thing she wanted. "Naomi, we don't have to figure this out tonight. We don't have to figure it out at all. The campaign, that's what matters. Everything else." She gestured helplessly between them. "We can pretend it didn't happen." "Can we?" His grey eyes held hers, intense and honest. "Because I don't think I can forget what you taste like." Heat flooded through her at his words, at the raw honesty in them. "Then we'll be careful," she said, though careful felt impossible now. "Professional in public. Whatever this is, we keep it private until the project ends, then we decide." It was logical, safe, the smart choice. It was also a lie, and they both knew it. You couldn't unfeel what they'd just felt, couldn't unknow what they now knew, that the connection between them was real and powerful, and absolutely devastatingly mutual. 2 more weeks, Dominic said. "We can manage 2 more weeks." Naomi nodded, gathered her things, and walked to the door on unsteady legs. "Naomi." She turned back. He stood silhouetted against the windows, Manhattan blazing behind him, looking like a man who'd just found something he'd thought was lost forever, and was terrified of losing it again. "That campaign you described, the woman choosing desire over duty." His voice was low, intimate. "I hope she takes the risk. I hope she discovers that sometimes the most important choice is the one that makes you feel alive." The implication was clear. He wasn't just talking about the campaign. Naomi smiled, brave and scared and exhilarated all at once. "Me too." Victoria Ashford had returned to her office for forgotten files when she saw them through Dominic's glass walls, Naomi in his arms, their kiss illuminated by city lights and the soft glow of desk lamps. She watched for 30 seconds, long enough to understand, long enough to feel fury crystallize into cold, calculated strategy. So it had gone that far already. The CEO and the intern, breaking every rule, risking everything for what? Infatuation, lust, some fantasy that this girl could fill the space Eleanor had left? Victoria's hand tightened on her briefcase until her knuckles went white. She'd been patient, strategic. She'd waited 3 years for Dominic to heal, rebuilt her position at Sterling Global, positioned herself as indispensable. And now, some intern, barely out of university, with none of Victoria's sophistication or strategic value, was undoing everything. Unacceptable. Victoria pulled out her phone, scrolling to a contact she'd cultivated carefully. James Rodriguez, journalist at Manhattan Business Weekly, always hungry for scandal, especially scandal at elite firms. She typed quickly, "Potential story. CEO favoritism, inappropriate relationship with intern, major ethics violations at Sterling Global." "Interested?" The response came within minutes. "Very. When can we talk?" Victoria smiled, cold and sharp as a knife. "Soon. Gathering evidence. We'll contact you after December 15th, after the Valentino Ricci presentation, after the campaign succeeded or failed, after Dominic had gotten what he needed from Naomi professionally. Then Victoria would reveal what had been happening personally. The scandal would destroy Naomi's career before it began. Would damage Dominic's reputation, make him vulnerable, remind him why personal feelings were dangerous. Would create a crisis only Victoria could help him navigate. And from crisis came opportunity. Victoria had learned that lesson well. Time to teach it to others. She took one last look at Dominic's office, now empty, the intern gone, Dominic alone by the windows, looking like a man who'd just stepped off a cliff. "Enjoy it while it lasts," Victoria murmured to the empty corridor. "Because I'm about to take everything away." Then she walked to the elevator, already planning her next move. Some women played checkers. Victoria Ashford played chess, and she'd just positioned her queen for checkmate. The final 2 weeks of the Valentino Ricci campaign were stolen moments wrapped in secrecy and professional brilliance. By day, Naomi and Dominic were strategist and CEO, polished, distant, communicating through presentations and analytics. By night, when the office emptied and Manhattan settled into its nocturnal rhythm, they were simply two people discovering each other in the spaces between words. They didn't kiss again. That would have been too dangerous, too easy to lose control. Instead, they existed in exquisite tension, conversations that lasted until dawn, hands that almost touched but didn't, glances that held promises neither dared speak aloud. Dominic told her about Elena, how they'd met at a charity gala, how she'd seen past his ambition to the lonely man beneath, how loving her had taught him that success meant nothing without someone to share it with. He spoke about Sophia with such tenderness that Naomi fell a little more in love with him every time the child's name crossed his lips. Naomi shared her own stories, growing up in Brooklyn with a single mother who worked double shifts, grandmother's Chanel perfume and fierce pride, the scholarship she'd almost refused because accepting help felt like admitting weakness. She told him about the night her grandmother died, how she'd held her hand and promised to make her proud. "You already have," Dominic said quietly that night, sitting across from her with the city glowing behind him. "She'd be so proud of who you've become." Those stolen hours were the most honest, most intimate moments of Naomi's life, and the most dangerous, because while they were falling for each other in the privacy of executive suites and midnight conversations, Victoria Ashford was building her trap with surgical precision. December 14th arrived with cruel winter sunshine, the day before the Valentino Ricci presentation. The campaign was perfect. Naomi had never been more certain of anything. They'd created something that would shift industry conversations, something that balanced aspiration and accessibility, heritage and innovation, logic and desire. Tomorrow, everything they'd built would be presented to Ricci's executive team. Tomorrow, their professional collaboration would end. And tomorrow night, they'd promised each other, they would finally decide what came next, whether this connection between them was worth the risk, worth fighting for. Naomi arrived at 8 in the morning to find the executive floor buzzing with unusual tension. People moved quickly, spoke in hushed tones, avoided eye contact. Something was wrong. She made it 3 steps toward Dominic's office before Marcus intercepted her, his face grave. "Naomi, conference room, now!" Her stomach dropped. "What's happening?" "Just come with me." The conference room held 4 people: Marcus, Claire from Strategic Accounts, someone from legal she didn't recognize, and Victoria Ashford, elegant in charcoal Armani, wearing an expression of concerned professionalism that made Naomi's skin crawl. "Sit down, please," the legal representative said, gesturing to a chair across from them. Naomi sat, her mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. "Miss Sinclair," legal began, opening a tablet. "We've received information about potential breach of confidentiality regarding the Valentino Ricci campaign. Do you know anything about that?" The words hit like physical blows. "What? No, I would never—" "Someone has been sharing campaign details with representatives from Hastings and Meyer." Victoria's voice was silk over steel. "They're Ricci's second-choice agency. The information shared matches elements of the campaign you and Mr. Sterling developed." "That's impossible." I haven't spoken to anyone about this project. Not friends, not family, not... These emails suggest otherwise. Legal turned the tablet toward her. Naomi's blood turned to ice. On screen were emails from her Sterling Global account to an address at Hastings and Meyer, sent over the past 4 weeks, containing strategy briefs, messaging frameworks, creative concepts, everything. The entire campaign, piece by piece, sent to their competitor. "I didn't send these," Naomi said, her voice shaking. "I've never contacted anyone at Hastings and Meyer. This is a mistake. The emails originated from your workstation," Legal said, not unkindly but inflexibly. "Sent during hours when you were logged into the system. The metadata is conclusive. Then someone accessed my account. Someone set me up." Naomi looked at Marcus, desperate. "You know me. I would never do this." Marcus's expression was pained. "I want to believe that, Naomi. But the evidence is fabricated." Her voice rose, panic giving way to fury. "Someone is framing me, someone who wants me gone." Her eyes landed on Victoria, who met her gaze with perfect, sympathetic composure. "I understand you're upset," Victoria said gently, as if speaking to a child. "But accusations won't help. If you've made a mistake, perhaps shared information you didn't realize was confidential, perhaps spoke with someone who seemed trustworthy but wasn't, it's better to admit it now. The firm can be lenient if you cooperate." The concern in Victoria's voice was so perfectly calibrated, so convincingly genuine, that Naomi almost doubted her own innocence for a heartbeat. Almost. "Where's Dominic?" Naomi demanded. "Does he know about this?" "Mr. Sterling was informed 1 hour ago," Legal said. "He's the one who authorized this meeting." The betrayal of that statement stole Naomi's breath. Dominic knew. For an hour, he'd known she was being accused of destroying everything they'd built together, and he hadn't come to her, hadn't defended her. "I need to speak with him," Naomi said, standing. "That's not advisable," Legal began, but Naomi was already moving. She left the conference room and walked directly to Dominic's office, her heart pounding with betrayal and desperate hope that he'd believe her, that 6 weeks of intimacy and trust hadn't evaporated with one fabricated accusation. His door was closed. She knocked once, didn't wait for permission, and entered. Dominic stood at the windows with his back to the door, shoulders rigid, hands in his pockets. He didn't turn around. "Dominic, is it true?" His voice was flat, empty of everything that had made it warm when he spoke her name in private. "No, someone forged those emails. Someone set me up. The evidence says otherwise. The evidence is a lie." Naomi moved toward him, needing him to look at her, to see her. "You know me. You know I would never betray you. Betray this." He finally turned, and the expression on his face shattered something in her chest. His eyes were dead, all the warmth she'd carefully kindled over 6 weeks extinguished, replaced by the cold, empty gaze of the man she'd met in the elevator before coffee and smiles and midnight confessions had humanized him. "I thought I knew you," he said quietly. "Clearly, I was wrong." "You weren't wrong. Dominic, please, don't." The word was sharp, cutting. "Don't call me that. Don't pretend these past weeks meant something when you were selling us out the entire time." "I wasn't." Desperation made her voice break. "I love this campaign. I love—" She stopped herself, but the unfinished sentence hung between them, devastating in its implications. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or the ghost of what they'd almost had. But it vanished quickly, replaced by ice. "Hastings and Meyer has withdrawn from the running," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "They received our strategy and realized they couldn't compete, so they removed themselves from consideration. In a twisted way, your betrayal ensured we'd win by default. It wasn't betrayal, but Ricci's team knows something leaked. They're questioning our security, our professionalism, our ability to protect confidential information. You've damaged Sterling Global's reputation right before the most important presentation of the year. Each word was a knife, precisely placed to cause maximum damage. And I handed you that power, Dominic continued, his voice dropping to something that sounded like self-loathing. I trusted you, gave you access, brought you into executive strategy, made you central to everything. I was so focused on... He stopped himself, jaw clenching. I let personal feelings compromise my judgment. I won't make that mistake again. Personal feelings. He couldn't even name what had been growing between them, couldn't acknowledge the connection that had made the past 6 weeks the most alive either of them had felt in years. Naomi felt something inside her break, cleanly, permanently. You're right, she said, her voice steady now, cold with its own brand of hurt. You did make a mistake, but not about my integrity. Your mistake was believing you were capable of trusting anyone again. Your mistake was thinking you could let someone in without finding a reason to push them away the moment things got complicated. His eyes flashed. Don't turn this around. Elena's death broke you, Naomi continued, the words spilling out with the clarity of heartbreak. And instead of healing, you've spent 3 years proving to yourself that caring about someone only leads to pain. So when evidence appeared, convenient, perfect evidence, you didn't question it. You welcomed it. Because it gave you permission to do what you were always going to do, push me away before I got close enough to hurt you. The silence that followed was absolute. Dominic stared at her with an expression so complex she couldn't read it. Anger and anguish and recognition all tangled together. Get out, he said finally, his voice barely audible. Gladly. Naomi moved to the door, then turned back one last time. For what it's worth, and clearly it's worth nothing to you, I didn't send those emails. Someone who wants me gone set this up, and you fell for it perfectly. I hope that certainty keeps you warm when you're alone again, which, Mr. Sterling, you absolutely will be. She walked out with her head high, her spine straight, her eyes dry. She made it to her desk, gathered her few personal belongings, while colleagues watched with a mixture of sympathy and scandal-hungry curiosity. Claire appeared at her shoulder, face troubled. Naomi, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened, but neither do I, Naomi said quietly. But I'm done trying to prove myself to people who've already decided I'm guilty. She walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. The doors opened with their cheerful chime, the same elevator where this had all begun 6 weeks ago with spilled coffee and an impossible smile. The doors began to close. At the last second, she looked up toward the 73rd floor, wondering if Dominic was watching, wondering if he felt even a fraction of what she felt, this tearing sensation, like being ripped in half. But the executive suite remained silent, dark, unchanged. The elevator descended, carrying Naomi away from the dream she'd built, and the man she'd almost loved, and the career she'd sacrificed everything to create. When she stepped out into the December cold, New York indifferent around her, one truth crystallized with perfect clarity. She'd survived poverty, loss, doubt, and 1,000 small cruelties on her way to this moment. She'd survived Dominic Sterling too, but some survivals came with scars that never fully healed. In his office, Dominic stood at the windows, watching Naomi's figure disappear into Manhattan's afternoon crowds. His reflection stared back at him, a man who'd just destroyed something precious because fear was easier than faith. His phone buzzed. Marcus, with a text that made his blood run cold. Digital forensics found something. The emails were sent remotely, not from Naomi's physical workstation. Someone with admin access could have done this. We need to talk. Now. Dominic's hands started shaking. What had he done? Marcus Chen had built his career on reading numbers and reading people, and both skills told him something was catastrophically wrong with the evidence against Naomi Sinclair. It was too perfect, too convenient, too precisely timed to destroy the campaign and the woman who'd brought his best friend back to life. He sat in Sterling Global's digital security office at 9 o'clock that same evening, watching the head of IT forensics pull apart the metadata on those damning emails. What they found made Marcus's blood boil. The emails originated from Miss Sinclair's account, the technician confirmed, highlighting code on his screen. But they weren't sent from her workstation. Someone with administrative access used remote login protocols. See this timestamp? 3:47 in the morning on November 23rd. Security logs show Miss Sinclair's keycard exited the building at 11:32 the night before. So someone else sent them, Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. Using her credentials, who has that level of access? The technician pulled up another screen. Executive-level employees, C-suite, senior VPs. He scrolled through names, then stopped. These particular logins originated from a workstation on the 68th floor, Senior Vice President Office Block, Victoria Ashford's floor. Marcus felt pieces click into place with sickening clarity. Victoria, who'd been engaged to Dominic before Elena. Victoria, who'd watched Dominic fall for Naomi with barely concealed fury. Victoria, who had both the technical access and the motive to destroy the woman she saw as competition. I need copies of everything, Marcus said. And I need the name of whoever accessed Naomi's account. The technician's fingers flew across the keyboard. It'll take me an hour to trace the specific user credentials, but I can tell you, don't tell me, show me, with evidence so clear even a heartbroken idiot couldn't deny it. Because Marcus knew his best friend, knew that Dominic's first instinct when threatened with loss was to push away before he could be abandoned. Knew that 3 years of grief had taught Dominic that loving someone meant losing them, so better to destroy the connection first, on his terms, where he could pretend he had control. Naomi had been right in her parting words. Dominic had welcomed the betrayal because it gave him permission to retreat to safety, but Marcus wasn't going to let him hide anymore, not this time. At 11 o'clock that night, Marcus entered Dominic's penthouse, a sprawling space of modern luxury in Tribeca, all glass and steel and carefully curated emptiness. He found Dominic exactly where he expected, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand, staring at Manhattan like a man searching for answers in city lights. "Go away, Marcus," Dominic said without turning. "No." Marcus set his laptop on the dining table, opened it with a sharp click. "You're going to look at this, you're going to see what you did, and then you're going to fix it. There's nothing to fix. The evidence was fabricated by Victoria, using administrative access to Naomi's account." Marcus's voice was steel. "The IT forensics are conclusive. Naomi was telling the truth, and you destroyed her anyway." Dominic turned slowly, his face ashen. "What? Come here, look." For 5 minutes, Marcus walked him through the evidence. Timestamps, remote access logs, the digital fingerprints that led directly to Victoria's workstation. With each piece of proof, Dominic's expression moved from disbelief to horror to something that looked like self-loathing. "She didn't do it," Dominic whispered finally, sinking into a chair. "Naomi didn't betray me. I betrayed her." "Yes, you did." Marcus didn't soften it. "Victoria played you perfectly. She knew your trauma, knew you'd assume the worst, knew you'd push Naomi away the moment you had an excuse, and you gave her exactly what she wanted." Dominic's hands were shaking. "I have to fix this. I have to—" He reached for his phone. "She won't answer," Marcus said gently. I've been calling her all evening. She's not picking up. After what you said to her, Dom, you cut her to pieces. You can't fix that with a phone call. Then I'll go to her apartment. And say what? Sorry I accused you of corporate espionage and told you to get out. Sorry I let my dead wife's ghost destroy the best thing that's happened to me in 3 years. Marcus leaned forward, his voice intense. You want to fix this? You need to do more than apologize. You need to show her, publicly, undeniably, that you believe in her, that you're willing to fight for her the way she deserved you to fight for her this morning. Dominic looked up, something shifting in his grey eyes. The presentation, tomorrow. Ricci's team, the full executive board, half the industry watching. Marcus nodded. That's your stage. That's where you make this right. What if she doesn't forgive me? Then you live with that. But at least you'll know you tried. At least she'll know the truth. Marcus stood, moved toward the door, then paused. Elena wouldn't want this for you, Dom. She wouldn't want you punishing yourself forever. She'd want you to live, to love, to be happy. After Marcus left, Dominic sat alone in his penthouse, staring at his phone, at Naomi's contact information, at the picture he'd taken secretly 3 weeks ago when she'd fallen asleep at her desk, exhausted and beautiful, her natural curls falling across papers covered in her elegant handwriting. He'd been falling in love with her, had been terrified by it, and the moment fear had given him an excuse to run, he'd taken it. Naomi had been right about everything, but tomorrow he'd prove she'd been wrong about one thing. He wasn't going to stay broken. Not anymore. The Valentino Ricci presentation was scheduled for 2 o'clock on December 15th in Sterling Global's largest conference room, a space designed to impress with panoramic windows and technology that could transform presentations into immersive experiences. By 1:45, the room was full. Ricci's executive team, 5 Italians in impeccable suits, speaking rapid Italian and eyeing everything with the critical assessment of people who knew quality, Sterling Global's board members, senior leadership, and Victoria Ashford, seated near the front, wearing champagne silk and a smile that suggested victory. What the room didn't know was that Marcus had spent the morning gathering evidence, building a case, and preparing for a presentation that would end one career and possibly save another. At 1:58, the doors opened. Dominic Sterling entered, commanding in charcoal brioni, his face showing none of the sleepless night behind him, followed by Marcus and the full creative team. But not Naomi. The presentation began precisely at 2 o'clock. Dominic spoke with his usual controlled brilliance, walking Ricci's team through the campaign, the emotional narrative Naomi had architected, the visual language they'd developed together, the strategy that balanced heritage and innovation. Except he didn't take credit. Every third sentence he attributed insights to Naomi. Our lead strategist, Naomi Sinclair, recognized that luxury consumers don't buy products, they buy identity. Miss Sinclair developed the emotional through line that transforms this from a car advertisement into a personal manifesto. The genius of this approach, and the genius belongs entirely to Naomi Sinclair, is that it makes the choice to purchase aspirational rather than transactional. Victoria's smile began to falter. The presentation moved through phases: print, digital, experiential marketing. Each element was flawless. The Ricci team leaned forward, engaged, clearly impressed. This was the campaign that would define luxury automotive marketing for the next decade. Then, 45 minutes in, Dominic paused. "Before we conclude," he said, his voice shifting from professional to personal, "I need to address something that happened yesterday, something that compromised both this campaign and Sterling Global's integrity." The room went silent. Victoria's face drained of color. Yesterday, evidence appeared suggesting our lead strategist had leaked confidential information to a competitor. Based on that evidence, I terminated her involvement in this project. Dominic's jaw tightened. I was wrong. The evidence was fabricated by someone within Sterling Global, someone who saw Miss Sinclair as a threat and engineered her removal. Marcus stepped forward, distributing tablets to Ricci's team and the board. Digital forensics completed last night. The evidence is conclusive. Dominic turned, and his eyes locked on Victoria. Miss Ashford, would you like to explain why you accessed Naomi Sinclair's account 17 times over 4 weeks? Why you sent emails to Hastings and Meyer using her credentials? Why you deliberately sabotaged this campaign and destroyed an innocent woman's career? Victoria stood, her composure cracking. This is absurd. I would never— The metadata doesn't lie, Marcus said coldly. Neither do security logs showing you in the office at 3:47 in the morning using your administrative access. Neither does the pattern of behavior. Each email sent shortly after Miss Sinclair left the building, ensuring she had no alibi. I was protecting this firm, Victoria's voice rose, desperation replacing elegance. That girl had you compromised, Dominic. She was using you, manipulating you with what? Brilliance, integrity, the kind of genuine connection you never offered. Dominic's voice was quiet, deadly. You didn't protect Sterling Global. You tried to destroy someone because she threatened your plan to manipulate me back into a relationship I never wanted to resume. The room was frozen, watching a private drama play out in public. You're fired, Dominic said flatly. Security will escort you from the building. Expect legal action for corporate sabotage. Victoria stared at him, fury and heartbreak warring in her expression. Then she grabbed her bag and walked out, heels clicking sharply against marble, leaving shocked silence in her wake. Dominic turned back to Ricci's team, his composure remarkable given the earthquake that had just occurred. My apologies for the disruption, but I needed you to understand that this campaign, the one you're considering, was created by someone with absolute integrity. Someone I wronged terribly by doubting her. Someone who deserves recognition regardless of whether Sterling Global wins this account. The lead Ricci executive, a silver-haired man named Antonio Ricci himself, leaned back, studying Dominic with sharp intelligence. This woman, Antonio said in accented English, Naomi Sinclair, she is here? No, Dominic admitted. She's not, because I destroyed her trust yesterday. And I'm hoping— His voice cracked slightly, the first break in his armor. I'm hoping that when she sees this, she'll understand I'm sorry, that I believe in her, that I was wrong. Antonio exchanged glances with his team, rapid Italian flowing between them. Then he smiled, genuinely, warmly. The campaign is brilliant, he said. But more impressive is this, a man who admits mistakes publicly, who values people over pride. These are rare qualities, Mr. Sterling. He stood, extended his hand. Sterling Global has our account. And when you find Miss Sinclair, you tell her Antonio Ricci said this, anyone who creates with such heart deserves someone who fights for her with equal passion. Don't fail her again. The room erupted in applause, for the campaign, for the contract, for the drama they'd just witnessed, but Dominic barely heard it, because there in the doorway stood Naomi Sinclair. She'd come to clear out her desk, had expected an empty office, not a presentation in progress. Had arrived just in time to hear everything, Dominic's confession, Victoria's exposure, Antonio Ricci's words about fighting for her. Their eyes met across the room, and the world narrowed to just them. Dominic crossed to her slowly, aware of 50 pairs of eyes watching, not caring about any of them. I'm sorry, he said when he reached her, his voice low, meant only for her. You were right. About everything. I was so terrified of losing someone again that I destroyed us before we even had a chance. I let fear make me cruel, and you deserved so much better." Naomi's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You humiliated me, made me feel worthless." "I know, and I'll spend however long it takes making that right." He paused, gathering courage. "If you'll let me, if you can forgive me. Not today. I know I don't deserve that yet, but eventually, maybe." She studied him, this powerful, broken, complicated man who'd smiled at her 6 weeks ago and changed everything. "You hurt me," she said finally. "Really hurt me. I know. And trusting you again, that's not something I can do immediately. I understand. But—" She took a breath and something softened in her expression. "But I also know what it's like to be so afraid of losing something that you push it away first. And I know that grief can make people do terrible things. So while I can't forgive you yet, Dominic, I'm willing to let you try to earn it." Hope broke across his face like sunrise. "The campaign," Naomi said, glancing past him to the room full of people. "We won. We won because of you. This was always yours, Naomi, your vision, your genius." He gestured to the presentation. "Come finish it with me, please." She looked at the room, at the Ricci team watching with romantic Italian interest, at Marcus beaming, at Claire giving her an encouraging thumbs up. Then she looked back at Dominic and made a choice. She took his hand. Together they returned to the front of the room and finished the presentation, equal partners, minds synchronizing the way they had for 6 weeks, creating something beautiful despite the pain between them. When it ended, when contracts were signed and hands were shaken, and Antonio Ricci kissed Naomi's hand and told her she had a standing job offer in Milan, she and Dominic finally found themselves alone in his office as sunset painted Manhattan gold. "What happens now?" Naomi asked quietly. "Now you take time, heal, decide if I'm worth the risk." Dominic moved to his desk, pulled out an envelope. "This is a formal offer. Associate Director of Strategic Development. Your own team. Your own accounts. No reporting to me. Complete professional independence." Naomi took the envelope, stunned. "Dominic, you earned it. Regardless of what happens between us personally, professionally, you deserve this. You're brilliant, Naomi, the best strategist I've worked with in 15 years. Don't let what I did make you doubt that." She opened the envelope, saw the salary, triple what she'd expected, and felt tears finally spill over. "And personally?" she whispered. He moved closer but didn't touch her. "Personally, I'm going to prove I'm worth trusting again. I'm going to show you that I can be brave enough to choose love over fear. I'm going to fight for you the way you deserved me to fight for you yesterday, however long it takes." Naomi smiled through tears. "That might take a while." "Good." His own smile was tentative, real, full of hope and regret and determination, because the best things are worth fighting for. And you, Naomi Sinclair, are worth everything. 6 months later, the late spring sunshine transformed Manhattan into a city of light and possibility. Naomi sat in her new office, 40 floors up, her name on the door, windows overlooking Central Park, reviewing the campaign that had just won Sterling Global the International Marketing Excellence Award. Her campaign, her team, her vision. She'd rebuilt herself over 6 months, had proven her worth beyond any doubt. Had become someone whose opinion shaped industry conversations, whose strategies launched careers, whose integrity was beyond question. And through it all, Dominic had kept his promise. He'd given her space, had supported her professionally without pressure personally, had shown up in small ways, coffee left on her desk with notes that said, "Proud of you," flowers sent after successful presentations, thoughtful texts that asked how she was without demanding anything in return. Slowly, carefully, trust had begun to rebuild. They'd had dinner last week, their first real date, awkward and wonderful and honest. He'd told her about therapy, about working through grief, about learning to be brave. She'd told him about healing, about boundaries, about choosing to risk her heart again because some people were worth it. And at the end of the night, he'd kissed her goodnight on her doorstep, gentle and full of promise, and asked if she'd like to meet Sophia this weekend. Naomi had said yes. Now, as sunset painted her office gold, her phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. "Proud of you, always. See you Saturday." Sophia's excited to meet the woman who makes her Uncle Dominic smile. Naomi smiled, typing back, "Saturday." "I'm excited too." Then she turned back to her work, building campaigns, launching careers, proving that sometimes the biggest accidents lead to the most beautiful transformations. Because 6 months ago, she'd spilled coffee on a stranger. And today, she was exactly where she belonged, stronger, wiser, and loved by a man who'd learned that the bravest thing you can do is let someone in. Some love stories begin with disaster. The best ones teach you how to rise from the ashes.